Greetings, Vents. Last night the Russian occupiers once again carried out a massive combined air attack against Ukraine. They launched ballistic missiles, Kinjal missiles, cruise missiles, and also deployed drones, but they forgot that this is a game that two can play.
Just as the enemy snapped back and attacked Cheboksary, Czech Republic with drones today.
Unknown but very effective Ukrainian drones paid a visit to the city of Cheboksary, which is not far from Tatarstan. Young Russians suddenly realized that a war had started and that they needed to run.
There it goes, flying right over the hospital.
War! War! That's it, I'm leaving tomorrow!
As usual, the Ukrainian drones didn't hit anything, there was no destruction, and even if there was, it was minor, just some debris falling.
Its bomb went off over there. Another explosion.
There are no casualties and no destruction either, accordingly. But it was unpleasant, and everyone in the city got scared today.
It was just unpleasant. But everyone is absolutely fine, just like the Russian strategic aviation remains completely intact. There are just a couple of scratches touched up with some paint and it'll be as good as new.
That's it, the planes can be repaired. With that, I suggest we close this topic.
The attack on Cheboksary is very important in order to save as many of our people's lives as possible because a factory involved in producing components for Shaheds was hit. The factory that was struck is called Progress. It supplies military electronics for ships and submarines of the so-called Russia. It also manufactures specialized antennas called Kometa, which are used in guided aerial bombs, missiles, and specifically in Shaheds. It is critically important for the Russian defense industrial complex and today it has suspended its operations. But unlike this factory, we are not stopping our work. We work every day, we buy FPVs every day, and we deliver them to the front every day. And in order for our military to be better supplied, we need your 2 hryvnias right now. All the payment details as always are in the description of this video, and of course don't forget to subscribe to my channel. During this day, not only was the plant in Cheboksary hit, but another very well-known place for Ukrainians was also struck. You've probably heard of a city called Savasleika in the so-called Russia, haven't you? And it's known not only for its drunks or dilapidated buildings, but also because Russian MiG-31 Kinjal missile carriers are based there. Surely every reasonable Ukrainian has dreamed of something hitting that place. And it finally did. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian drones reached the Savasleika airfield in the Nizhny Novgorod region of the so-called Russian Federation. According to preliminary information, 2 units of enemy aircraft were hit, likely MiG-31 and either Su-30 or Su-34 jets. The results of the combat operation are being clarified. We will wait for further details. In the meantime, let's talk about what could potentially help bring down the so-called Russian Federation.
Russia needs to be dismantled. The only thing that can defeat us is collapse from within.
Ramzan Kadyrov's right-hand man, General Alaudinov, decided to go after a representative of the Russian Orthodox Church because during one of his sermons, the latter started saying that perhaps Moscow is being taken over by Islamists and that they might start slaughtering Russians.
That's an entire army. And if, one fine day, the mullah orders them to slaughter Muscovites, believe me, they'll do it quickly, because the Ministry of Internal Affairs won't even have time to react or handle it. And the result will be very sad.
Well, I wouldn't say the result will be sad when all this happens. On the contrary, it will be very interesting and fun. But if we're talking about Moscow, it really hasn't belonged to the Russians themselves for a long time.
No one likes walking through the center of Moscow and suddenly catching themselves thinking, where are you? Are you in the city of 4040s or are you in some kind of Jalalabad?
Allahu Akbar, truly.
This of the Russian Orthodox Church was outraged about. By the way, he is quite well known in what is called Russia. So Abti Alaudinov recorded a video message in which he called for the priest from the Russian Orthodox Church to be punished.
He put on a cassock seriously. I can't call him anything but an idiot. This is a representative of the army of the Antichrist. There's no other way to put it. He's telling 2 billion Muslims that our faith is wrong. I really have to ask, who exactly are you to say things like that anyway?
Such things in so-called Russia without asking the Kadyrovids for permission. And that's exactly why the Russian Orthodox Church immediately expelled this priest after Alaudinov's appeal. And you won't believe it, but the Russians practically started to revolt. Well, almost. They gathered in Moscow and started demanding that the priest be reinstated in the Russian Orthodox Church and that Alaudinov absolutely must be punished by law enforcement.
With the demand to reinstate the abbot of the Sochi compound, we demand that the investigative authorities and the military prosecutor's office look into and legally assess the statements
Made publicly by an official in the uniform of a general of the Russian army.
The Kadyrovite, as the master of the Russians, of course, did not like this. He reminded them that their place is in the stable and denied the words he had said earlier.
Where do you hear that I am threatening the priest? And if anyone raises the head of nationalism, that head must be cut off. It simply must be cut off. Where? You don't see anything like that there. It's not there.
There is one more thing that Russians are seeing less and less often in their so-called Russia, and that's crosses. Literally. The Russian authorities are so afraid of Kadyrovids and, in general, Islamists in the so-called Russian Federation that on many official posters, leaflets, and even on television, they have started to paint over crosses.
Crosses are disappearing from Orthodox churches, being replaced with neutral diamonds.
This pastime is especially popular, of course, among the Kadyrovids. In Chechnya, they paint over crosses almost everywhere, including on the coat of arms of the so-called Russia. The situation has gone so far that even the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, who calls himself Patriarch Kirill, was forced to respond to it.
Shame crosses are being shamefully erased from images of churches and even from state symbols. But what should be shameful is not the cross, but their lack of roots and memory.
In one of the previous episodes, I already mentioned that a deep economic crisis, which will begin to intensify closer to the end of this year, could lead to the collapse of the so-called Russia. But interethnic and interreligious conflicts will also contribute to this wonderful process. It will be very difficult for Ukraine to defeat the so-called Russia solely and exclusively on the battlefield. That is why we must resort to methods of asymmetric warfare, carry out more special operations, sabotage, and help the so-called Russia ignite internal conflicts. There are many painful points that are worth working on. One could also mention the illegal migrants, whose numbers in the so-called Russia are increasing, because Russian men are fighting against Ukraine, and meanwhile,
Our husbands, sons, and brothers are defending our homeland. In the neighborhood, most of the residents are women and children, and there is no one to protect us.
And even the Russians themselves who fought against Ukraine, the illegal migrants aren't particularly afraid of them. There are more and more reports of so-called SVO veterans being beaten up.
Just yesterday, right here, in this very spot, our comrade was brutally beaten up, specifically our SVO veterans.
Again, I am convinced that the collapse of the so-called Russia is inevitable. And it's only a matter of time. We will definitely live to see those wonderful times. But right now, the Russians continue to wage war against Ukraine and unfortunately are having some tactical successes. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka directions, where the Russians are carrying out massive assaults every day and sometimes even use armored vehicles. But without armored vehicles, only with infantry groups, the enemy is advancing in the Sumy region and has also made some gains there in recent days. At the moment, we have almost 80 unpaid requests just from these directions, but we also continue to provide assistance to Zaporizhzhia, the Novopavlivka direction, Kherson region, Kharkiv region, and not only there. We are currently helping by supplying drones to all sections of the front. That's why I'm once again asking for your donation. Meanwhile, thanks to you, our soldiers have received another 350 new FPVs. Glory to the heroes. The Russians have already moved on to the active phase of their summer offensive campaign. They are mainly using infantry in their assaults. The consumption of drones is increasing, so once again I am asking you to help the security and defense forces of Ukraine.